Hello everybody, that's here. Very happy to see all of you on the other side of the screen. Thank you for joining me today. In today's video I would like to make my personal review and opinion on all 7 water blocks I tested back to back, and I already released a previous video which shows test result and my observations, and I try to refrain to any sort of recommendations or my personal opinions in that video, so you can make your own conclusions and make your own decision just based on the basically test results of all those 7 blocks. In this video I will not talk as much about the test results. I will be more talking about what I like and dislike about all those water blocks. All of them have some pluses and some minuses basically. Let's start with the EK water blocks. For this company you have 2 options for the water blocks they're offering. One is a standard water block with passive backplate, so water block on one side and aluminum backplate on the other side. It's the same like for everybody else. And also you have for some model you have an option for the active backplate, which is essentially 2 water blocks sandwiched together. You have one water block on one side and you have other water block on the other side, and that usually work a little bit better than the passive model. In my testing results, active version was pretty much consistently in top 3, while passive version was more towards the bottom of the list. So why you would like to have EK? There's a couple of reasons. One is EK, relatively big company, and they have quite a variety of the blocks available, both AMD and NVIDIA. So it could be situations that essentially for your specific model that's the only choice or the only choice available in stock or generally in your country. So that could be a reason why you want EK. Second reason, I find that a lot of my customers really like the design. I personally don't think it's great because it's not enough metal, it's a lot of plastic, very squarish, kind of boring looking. But I believe that because of EK so popular and have so many builds online, people see those builds and they just want something similar. So it's subjective opinion. You like it, great. You dislike it, that's your opinion as well. So another reason that you might want EK is the fact that you have better visual representation, if you will. So with the fact that you have 2 water blocks on both sides, doesn't matter how your computer case is located next to you, you always will have at least one side that shows your water channels and potentially lights if you want. For example, I have my case labs, my main computer right here. So you can see I have a Heatkiller inside. It's 3080 and it's facing us with a backplate. So essentially nothing to see here, just a black backplate with little light on it. Theoretically, ideally, I personally would like to see other side of the water block, which looks totally awesome. It could be possible if the computer will be standing on the right side of me, then I will see the block, but because it's on the left, then I can't see it. With this water block it wouldn't be an option, so could be a reason why you want to have something like this. So because you doesn't matter how you mount it, you always see visual representation of your water cooling build. Now looking into the negatives, it's a little bit longer list for me. Let me elaborate a little bit. One is, I think it's uncomfortable level of the pricing. EK at some point decided that they want to be a luxury brand, just because they decide, not because any prehistoric reasons or previous history of that company. They always was kind of mainstream, but they decided we're not mainstream, we're high-end, and they start hijacking prices year after year. And at this point it basically essentially is one of the most expensive water blocks on the market. I don't think price performance ratio actually warranted to look at EK at this point, because you can have better value and same or better performance with other brands, but the pricing is something that making a lot of customers to turn away. I understand that there's still a number of people who have enough cash that they don't care, but for average builder I think the EK became a little bit price prohibitive at some point. Second thing that I don't like is a visual thingy. So you can see that they use very small part, which is actual copper plate, and you have, when you install it, you need to be mindful that thermal pads that installed on the voltage regulators on both sides might be sticking out, and it doesn't look great at all. And so you can see that both models, passive or active, they have this problem. I didn't bother to work through it because it was just for testing reasons, and I knew that unlikely I will keep EK from my own needs. But when you install it, it could be nice if they actually included into the manual that you should cut thermal pads exact, so they're not sticking out, especially because there's this bluish baby blue color that definitely very visible on top of the GPU. Another thing that I a little bit dislike, that how they designed the cutout for the connector for the power, both passive and both active and passive. So the connector goes pretty deep in, installation not a problem, but when you need to disconnect it for whatever reason, then it was really challenging to take the connector out. So I have to use kind of flat screwdriver to press it. So yeah, I think it's kind of not very well thought type of the design, and I think the connector should be accessible pretty easily. It wouldn't hurt to make the hole a little bit bigger. Another thing that I would like to note, that specifically for the active backplate, you can see because of it is two water blocks jammed together, it's actually wide. So for me it was a little bit problem with the clearance. It was so wide that it was almost hitting my RAM sockets on the motherboard. So if you have, let's say, for whatever reason you don't press latches on the RAM completely in the right position and they're kind of a little bit leaning, like fraction of millimeter, you'll start hitting those latches and you can't install it, or you pop your memory out. So it's super tight type of the design, which can be potentially problematic because you're not realizing what's happening. You can keep pressing, so it can be a physical damage. And on the same note, when you need to take the block out, on some motherboard you have a separate button like ASUS, but on a regular motherboard you have this part on a PCI slot that you need to press down. Also, it's no way to access it except with a kind of a long screwdriver, so it should be also be careful to press it without slipping and scratching your motherboard. So yeah, this thing was a little bit finicky in this sense. And the last thing that I dislike about EK specifically is they turned to be one of the most laborious to install. I can't say it was hard because I'm doing it for a while, so I can install whatever, but the tedious process of cutting and applying the thermal pads like take you forever and kind of boring process. Also, when you have an active backplate, this terminal that connects them together, also it's a little bit not obvious that in order to install it properly you need to loosen all screws, which is not, I think, clearly said in the manual. So it's a little bit tricky installation for somebody who doing for the first time. It could be like a little bit overwhelming. So overall, the only reason why you want EK could be probably availability, or you really like the design. Otherwise, there's a couple other manufacturers and models that offer, I think, a little bit better personal experience and cooling performance. Now, moving to Alphacool. Alphacool is interesting company. I think that in the past couple years they make the biggest progress as a manufacturer for both quality improved, variety of the models improved. So the first there was a lot of really ugly stuff, but now they start making a variety of water cooling products that doesn't look that bad at all, and I was pleasantly surprised with performance and my experience with both Alphacool models. I'll start with cheaper version. So this is Ace block or Ice block in English. So essentially, as this is a representation of the not expensive water blocks that probably will be very similar to any like Chinese water blocks on the market. So a lot of people who like telling me that they like Buxi or Barrow, whatever, those which I didn't test, second or third tier manufacturers. So it's very simple. You have your cooling plate, you have a very simple back plate. The performance will be not on top of the list, but it will be comparable with the K, or again, the difference between performances, as you saw in my test, if you saw it, not that great. It's only start showing up in more heavy tasks. So this model is essentially the reason why you wanted. First of all, Alphacool also expand the coverage for their water block. So it's quite a few models why this one is available for different GPU. So there's a chances that you will find ice block that is working for your specific model is relatively high. And the main benefit of this block, I think, is the fact that essentially it's not very expensive. So in terms of the performance versus cost, and nothing else getting close. So this is the best value for your money. At the same time, unlike many Chinese manufacturers, you have a full coverage for warranty, and you have a number of resellers who are working with them, who have access to spare parts, you can arrange your RMA. So it's a little bit more peace of mind, if you will, if it's important for you. Now moving to the core, this was a very interesting block. I never saw anything like this in the sense that it has really huge piece of metal cut out into the water block, including the ports. Normally you have a ports as a plastic thing attached to the side of the block, like it is separate piece. You can see most of the models like this. Here essentially is a water block, and this part with the port, it's one piece of metal. So it's virtually impossible to to damage it, because sometimes you can crack those ports and they need to replace them, or there's a crack on the connection point. So it's a lot of points of failure for this type of design, and for the years you deal with a lot of things that happening. Doesn't matter which manufacturers, it just the nature of the things. You have one piece of plastic, second piece of plastic tightened up with screws, and eventually somewhere somehow crack. So that's just naturally happening. This one is basically indestructible. It's just one piece of metal, so nothing will happen with this. Naturally, there's a little disadvantage of that thing, because it's just a one piece of metal. You can't change it. With a variety of other manufacturers, when you have this port attachable, you can replace it with, let's say, other models where the ports is kind of facing not traditional way, like 45 degrees or some other direction. So it could be a little bit specific situation when you want this type of the port, because you want to replace it with some specific type of the terminal. But this one is essentially, it's unchangeable because it's just piece of metal. This is one of the heavier block, and I noticed that any block that uses more metal, generally speaking, perform better than the blocks that use a less amount of metal. So they actually weight somehow matters, so it's cooling better. So in my particular test, this one was consistently on top of the list. It's not that much more expensive than ice block, so if I would be choosing between two, naturally I would go for the core. Generally speaking, between all the block I tested, I think the core would be my second choice in the entire list. So that's something that I really like. So this is also the block that looks pretty neat. It has a full coverage, no plastic see-through part to PCB, so this full coverage that I always like, and I see less and less type of the blocks that offering this type of functionality. So I wholeheartedly recommend this block, because again, it's not very expensive, cooling excellent, it's also safer because bracket attached right to the block, so less stress on PCB of your card. So I think that's one of the most interesting offering on the market in past year and moving forward. Now moving to Bitspower. Bitspower, traditionally luxury type of manufacturer, always was one of the most expensive. Not anymore, because they now a little bit slow down the pricing, probably under the competitive pressure. But in terms of design, it's very similar to Ice Block essentially, just at the higher price. So we have a partial coverage for the metal, you have a plastic terminals, and overall I think the tolerances of this block actually pretty good. So the quality of manufacturing continues to be very high for Bitspower. But for whatever reason they decide to go fancy, and they have a previous version which have a standard type of the backplate, but now they decide that they want kind of provide high pressure on the chip, and they did a cutout on this backplate, and you use a retention bracket from the air-cooled version of your GPU. So essentially it's supposed to provide higher contact and cool it better, but it's essentially backfired. This part became hotter comparing with everybody else, so the cooling performance of the main chip wasn't that great. And you can see even on like thermal cameras that this part is much more hotter compared with anything else, because when you look on the camera for the rest, you have everything spread up a little bit more evenly across backplate. Here we have a localized heat, and it's hurt this water block in terms of the cooling performance. Was the top performing block at all. But at the same time, where the more traditional things stays, such as the cooling for VRM and memory, the contact was absolutely perfect, and the cooling performance for the memory was essentially on the top of the list. And I feel that they wouldn't make this cutout, this block probably would perform much nicer way comparing with what we get. Now moving to Heatkiller, I will tell you right away that for me personally it is the top choice, because it's offered good balance between price, and it's also mostly on the top of the list for the performance. And it has this industrial type of design which I like, not much see-through PCB stuff that you can see in many other blocks, which I usually don't like. I prefer it's everything covered. So there are a couple reasons why. One thing that I would like to mention is a lot of people asking, just in the end of my testing they released a newer version of this block. So this is like version 1 if you will, and now they release the ultra version which will have a bigger cooling backplate similar to Optimus. It would be expected that probably will get you maybe another 1-2 degree in performance, probably will match Optimus, but we don't know. I ordered ultra version for myself, and I plan to use it in my personal computer when I replace my 3080. But the model I tested was the standard model, not ultra, and it still was on top of the list for everything. This very heavy block, a lot of metal used. Again, as with core, the amount of metal actually pays off, so the performance was very nice. One thing that I consider potential disadvantage, but it depends, because it has this less used design with the ports at the end of GPU that's traditionally make your tube routing a little bit different. Could be advantage, could be disadvantage. I would say the traditional location of the terminal is probably a little bit easier for thinking about your design, especially for people who are not building for the first time, because you do it like 10 times before, you're already kind of in your head how you do it. When you have this type of layout, if you never use it, essentially it's like building for the first time. I'm still not sure how to will route my tubing, but overall this model was very solid. I wish they have attachment to the block itself for the bracket, but other than that, price and performance characteristic just right for me personally, as well as design. So essentially this will be my first choice. If the block wouldn't be available for my card, I would go with the core. And actually it's one of the disadvantages of Heatkiller, because it's a small company mostly specializing in industrial applications, and it's much smaller part of the company dealing about consumer water cooling. Normally you don't have many models covered. So like Asus usually covered it, like and basic Founder Edition or standard reference type of block is covered. But if you have something else, most likely you're out of luck with Heatkiller. Also, they take quite a bit time, it's probably one last company then come out with a block. So if you want Heatkiller, you essentially wouldn't get it at the launch or 1 month after launch of the new GPU, so you have to be patient. But if you're in the middle of the cycle, this is a very good choice, and it's available already. Now the last one is Optimus. That was very interesting block. I never had opportunity to work with Optimus. I have a lot of customers who is using Optimus for both CPU and GPU. They're always very in a high opinion about it. So it was interesting to get this block. This is also one of the heavier blocks, so the same like a core again, Heatkiller and Optimus. It's a big chunk of metal which is pays off in cooling performance. The block shows really excellent results in the cooling for the core, but for some reason it didn't really work well for your memory cooling. So I did a few experimentations. I even removed the Cera coating because I thought maybe it's a reason, and it didn't really improve. So I did it 2 mounts because I wanted to make sure that there's no problem with the mounting, especially because mounting was a little bit hard, and I thought maybe I screwed up somewhere. But both tests showed me the same result, and memory water cooling was not the top of the list, it was the last of the list. But speaking about the reasons why you want to have this block specifically, first of all, it's absolutely dead gorgeous. I have a black version with the Cera coated. You also can have a nickel plated or chrome plated, I'm not sure, so like silver version. So it's a really neat looking block, and it's absolutely thrilled to have it. Another reason why I think that especially American guys should be supporting Optimus, because essentially it's only one North American manufacturer for the water cooling equipment. So if you want it being around, you have to support them. In terms of price performance, this is second most expensive block, so you have to pay a little bit money to get something that you like, and obviously not everybody can afford it. Another reason that I found a little bit disadvantage for Optimus is, if you remember my installation video, they have a backplate which is one huge piece of thermal pad, and essentially you sink your PCB on this big piece of thermal pad. But it's actually a bit backfired at the end, because when I needed to remove a PCB, because I decided that I probably will go with the Heatkiller Ultra version, and it was really hard to remove PCB from the backplate because it's sinking into it and it gets sucked so hard. I have to basically put a little bit higher pressure levels to try to disconnect. Then I feel comfortable. I was a little bit concerned that I don't go too hard and accidentally crack my PCB. So this decision actually have a little bit disadvantage than when you need to disassemble your assembly. Then it's actually not easy at all, and I think that maybe smaller pieces of the thermal pads may be a better decision from that point, because I'm not sure how much better performance you get by using this big thermal pad across entire PCB. It just creates problems later. So that's basically in a nutshell, my opinion about those blocks. Maybe you prefer to watch my first video and look at numbers, make a decision yourself, but if you want my subject expert opinion, that's what it is. Thank you for watching, and I see you soon, guys.